Hi, everybody. It's Michelle Jackson, and I'm here with another amazing author to talk about her work. Now, if you're on the Facebook page, on the Black Writers Workspace Facebook page, we do ask that you go to your personal page and you share this so that we can optimize the number of people who are viewing it. If you're on YouTube, we also ask that you send us a little comment so we'll know that you're there. And also to let everyone know that we are about to have another amazing conversation with one of the authors from the Black Writers Workspace. So I'm Michelle Jackson. I'm the founder of the Black Writers Workspace. I am also the author of two books. One is The Heart of a Man, and the other is From Darkness to Night. You can find my work on www.authormichelledjackson.com. We have Dr. Kisha Roberts-Tabb, and Dr. Tabb was someone who was a part of our event last Friday, which was our virtual book fair, and she was at that particular event. And I'm so excited to have her because she's participated in events in the past. And so it's exciting to have her to talk about her work, her series, Whose Little Girl Am I, and to learn more about her work in advocating for women and in really fighting against sex trafficking. So we're excited to have her. Let's bring her on the screen. Hey, how you doing?
Good. How are you?
I am good. Thank you so much for being here with us and sharing your work with us and being a part of the Black Writers Workspace. This is great because I feel like I know you, but I don't know you. You're on the Instagram page. You have participated in our past book fairs, but we've never had a chance to meet. But now, when I'm creating all the promos and all the different things, I'm seeing your pictures and the balloons behind your head, and I'm like, I want to meet her. I got to meet her at some point. So this is exciting to have you here to talk about your work. And so please, don't hesitate to talk to us about the books, both of them, and to talk to us about the work that you do every day, your 9 to 5. We're really, really interested in learning more about you. But before we get into our conversation, I want to tell everyone out there, if you're on Facebook, if you're on the Black Writers Workspace page, please hit like. If you're not on that page and you want to share this on your page, go to author Michelle D. Jackson's page and you can find this particular link where we are live, and you can share that on your page. If you're on YouTube, please share it as well. You can also drop comments in the comment box. We will be asking Dr. Roberts-Tabb those questions and learning more about her very quickly. So let's talk about your work. Tell us about yourself and tell us about your work.
So I'm Dr. Kisha Roberts-Tabb. I'm the author of 4 books. And so my writing style is a little different than most urban writing styles because I really write from a perspective of observed and lived experience. And I think it's important that we tell the Black female experience, the story of the Black female experience, because we learn from that, we grow from that, we find strengths in each other's experience. And I think that it is important. And if you think about, my work really started with my mother's struggle. My mother struggled with drug addiction. She struggled with, she was diagnosed with HIV and AIDS. She died when I was 19. And so I always felt that type of life, having lived that could not have been a coincidence. It couldn't have been a mistake. And I've always felt like God had allowed me to experience her struggle so that I can bring some dignity to her life, even if it was after death. And so that was always important to me, to represent women that look like me, that came from where I came from and just found themselves without a voice sometimes and, very limited choices. And so I write from that perspective.
So your books, you have 4 books. Give me the name of your books.
So the first book is a compilation book. It's Grace. It can be found on Amazon. It's a collection of 35 women who wrote letters to our younger self. That was released the same year as my first book, is Whose Little Girl Am I? And Whose Little Girl Am I is really a generational account of lived and observed female experiences in one family. So I really dive into how I experienced my mom, the things that I knew about her experience. When I talked about experiencing her and her rearing, I had my sister give an account of what that felt like to her. Because one thing that I know for sure is that everyone's everyone's experience is different. You could live in the same house, be raised by the same parents, but you're going to experience them different. And when you read it, my experience with my mother was totally different than my sister's experience with my mother. We have a sister that is not by my mother, but by my father. So when I talked about my experience and my father, I wanted her experience too, because definitely had a different experience being outside of the household. Then I talked about motherhood, and I had my daughter write about what it was like being reared by me and the things that I brought into my mother-daughter relationship from my mother-daughter relationship. And so it really is a generational, it is a collection of generational experiences. And I think that, and we dive into everything from my mom's addiction to relationship to abandonment to illness to death to grief, to finding yourself in relationships, to even my daughter talked about trying to live up to, you know, the name of being my daughter and what that meant for her and how she struggled in that. And so I was really pleased that so many people were able to relate to that story. I got tons and tons and tons of emails and chats and text messages about, you know, how did you know this was going on? And I'm like, that's my story. I didn't know it was your story as well. So that was the first book. And then I wrote a journal to that because it became such a discussion piece. So I thought that a guided discussion guide would be very good, you know, so that we can have these discussions around some of the issues that come up in the book. And then my grandson and we wrote KJ Goes to Big Boy School. That was his COVID project. That's my first children's book. And I literally had him tell me what it was like. And he was so vivid in telling me about his first day of school that I felt like we got to get this on paper. And so that's how that book came across. And then the last book, Who's Little Girl 2? Who's Little Girl 2 really dive into the work I do around exploitation. And so I give an account of exploitation from 7 different lenses, from the lenses of 6 girls that is involved in exploitation and the woman that has been assigned to help them out of that world. And so this book came about because, of course, when you do the work, it's almost like I couldn't understand why I was so attracted to that work. I've never been trafficked. I've never been in a situation of exploitation, which I thought I hadn't. And so I was always so curious about why am I so attracted to this work. But when I started to think about the relationships that I had experienced through my life, I had been exploited. It just wasn't commercially exploited. I had been exploited in a lot of relationships. I had been exploited in a lot of friendships. And so I wrote from that perspective and just how the two worlds collide and why we need each other. We survivors need non-survivors. And, you know, we have to be able to get these young girls' stories out because the girls that I see look like me. But the girls that I see on the news don't look anything like Black and brown girls. And so I wanted to make sure that I got that story out, and not just the story of them being exploited, but the story of their triumph.
You know, Keisha, you've said a lot. I mean, you probably said so much until we could talk for another 4 or 5 hours. I mean, really, because there's just so much I want to pick your mind around because I feel like you're saying the things that have been resonating with me, you know, as a Black woman who lost my mother in 2005. And some of the things that I dealt with in my last book, which was the mother-daughter relationship, the Black mother-daughter relationship, which I can't speak to it from any other perspective, but it's something I don't think we talk enough about. You know, I really don't think we do. I think there's an assumption because we are of the same sex that we always get along and see eye to eye on certain things, and we grow up and we envy our parents, and there's a lot of truth to that, but there is also a lot of things that we fail to discuss with our mothers and we learn from our mothers. There are a lot of conversations we fail to have with our where our mothers fail to have with us, and so we end up getting into the cycle of bad relationships and doing the things that they may have done. And I love the idea that you are talking about these issues. Now, let's start with your first book. So you wrote, well, one of your books, I won't say the first one. You wrote a letter to yourself. What was in that letter? And tell us the name of that book again.
That book is called Grace. The byline author is Tiffany Fincher, which is an amazing woman. You know, she brought us all together to tell our stories because she felt the same way that you did, that our stories as women we don't really talk about what we didn't know or what we wish we had known. And so we all picked an age. I picked 15. And I picked 15 because it was at 15 that I really started dealing with the embarrassment of having an addicted mother. I shortly found out that my mother had contracted HIV, and I found out the way I found out was just horrible. And so I felt that at 15, if someone had just given me the proper support, I could have bypassed a lot of painful situations. And so I wrote to that 15-year-old girl, and I wrote to her from the perspective is that it gets better. That's the name of my chapter. It does get better. And I talked about thinking that I was the only person in the neighborhood who had a crackhead mother when I wasn't. All my friends' mother was addicted to something. They just wasn't talking about it. I talked about appreciating the crown that my father had placed on my head instead of stepping on it and trying to find me a b-boy cap, because it didn't look like the regular, like the crown that he was placing on my head was so different than the hats that I saw in my neighborhood. And I talked about my relationship with my sister and how I just talked about letting that 15-year-old girl know that you think this girl getting on your nerve, but this is going to be your biggest ally. This is going to be your biggest supporter. This is going to be the only person that know what you went through, and you are going to have to depend on each other. I talked about the relationships that I thought I was going to die if it didn't happen at 15. You break up, you like, oh, this is it. I'm dead. Like, I don't never want to see another man again. And how you find love after that. And so that really, really opened me up. I had actually started writing Who's the Little Girl Am I, the first one. But when I wrote that letter to my 15-year-old self, I actually was able to see the areas that really in my life went unaddressed when I started to write that letter to my younger self.
So, you are writing books that require you to be very transparent.
Yes.
How did you get to that place of transparency?
I think that I started off telling other people's story. And I think it's, I don't know about you, but it's always easier. So when I say tell other people's story, I don't take a person and I just write about that person. What I try to do is take a collection, because, so we're so many different pieces. And so I think it's important. And if you combine all of those pieces, you get a real live person. And so I borrowed from different women that I had, in my life. And that's how I started writing. When I wrote about my mother's been dead for over 25 years. So to have to tell a story about her, I had to pull from stories of other people, because I didn't always experience her the way that you may have experienced your mother. Right. A lot of my experiences with my mother was through hearsay. I had not lived with my mother since I was 7 years old. And so a lot of my experiences came from what people were saying, or my relationship with her as my homegirl, not my mother. And so that made it easier to open up and to be vulnerable, because it was almost like I was talking about somebody else. I really wasn't talking about my life, because I had never dealt with any of those things. So it didn't even feel like my story, if that makes sense.
Yes.
All of that stuff, everything that happened was just, swept under the rug. And so putting a different name to it, and, dividing it up in this person's story and that person's story, it made it easier to tell, because I didn't feel like I was telling on anyone. And that was my biggest thing when I started writing. I don't want anybody to feel like I'm telling their business, because, in Black families, what happened in this house, stay in this house. And who are you to start talking about what happened in this house? And so when I put a different name to it and I started to write and combine some stories, it made it easier to get it out.
So did the writing help you heal?
Yes. It helped me heal in some areas, and it opened up some areas that I thought I was healed from.
And talk to us about, because let's go back to this transparency thing and this Black family and the traditions and all these things. This is, we grow up with this idea that talking about our family is taboo. You don't put that information out there. But as a writer, and as someone who is trying to use writing therapeutically, you have to find a balance between being, open and honest and transparent, and trying to protect those you love. But sometimes trying to protect them continues to bury you. And so, did you find that there were people in your world who just really preferred if you had protected them by not talking about this story? And how did your sister how did she feel about you talking about your mother's story in a book?
Um, to answer your first question, it was people that really call themselves checking me.
Mm-hmm.
Like she wasn't that and she wasn't that bad. And I had to explain to a lot of people that you experienced her outside of your home. It was funny to you when she came home high and she was cracking jokes. But for me, every time she walked in that door, it took a piece of my heart with it. Like every time she smoked the rock, it was like it was destroying who I was as a woman, because we look at our mothers as our guide to womanhood. And so to see my mother constantly chipping away at not just her soul, but her dignity and her appearance and all of that, it did something to me as a woman. It made me
Mm-hmm.
question who I was and who I would be, like who I would turn out. And so I just had to do a lot of explaining that this is my story and you don't have to approve of my experience.
Mm-hmm.
When it came to
Yeah.
my sister, um, the first 6 experiences that I wrote about as a fundraiser to raise money 10 years ago, over 10 years ago, to raise money for HIV and AIDS. Because me and my sister, I'm a psychologist, my sister is a medical doctor. And so while my sister was studying to be a doctor, we would do HIV testing drives. And so she lived in a different state. She lived in Nashville and I lived in Chicago. So, of course, I can't administer tests, but I can make monologues. So I
Mm-hmm.
started writing these monologues in order to raise funding to donate to women, while my sister and we would do just like me and you are doing. We would be online, be on
Mm-hmm.
Facebook and talking. She would be testing people and we would be, my people would be saying their monologues. And so I think it kind of eased her into the idea that this story will be coming out. So when I asked her to write her experience, it took her all of 3 hours. It was like she had been waiting to tell her side of it.
Mm-hmm. What were some of the myths that you feel like your work demystified about growing up in a household with someone who's an addict? I do believe that this is the area where, as a Black person, we don't talk enough about,
Mm-hmm.
and that addiction is drinking, drugs, food,
Gambling.
and every gambling and everything in between. But we just kind of say it's okay, it's what uncle is doing, what daddy is doing, what mom is doing, and we kind of try to act like it doesn't literally destroy so much
Mm-hmm.
of who we are. I know this personally. That's why I'm saying this. I know it personally. So what did your book demystify, good or bad, about growing up the way you did?
So one of the things that it demystified is that the person that is addicted is the only addict.
Mm,
One of the things that I didn't even recognize until I started writing was that I was addicted to saving my mother. I was addicted to chasing her. I was addicted to looking for validation from her. And I had a wonderful father. And that's another thing that I think it was important to give the perspective on how I was reared by my father, because I left my mother's house at such an early age. But my father's family always accepted my mother. And so I think that's another thing that it kind of brought light to, that, when relationships don't work out, sometimes just for the benefit of the children, the adults know how to make it work.
mm-hmm.
And they had to make it work without a maternal figure. Um, I think that another thing that really, really came out of the story was um, about, I think one of the one chapter that I really love is called No New Friends. And I think that that's important, because I think that we got this myth that Black women cannot be, they can't be, they can't be good friends.
Mm-hmm.
We're backstabbing, we're this, we're angry, we're that. And I think that chapter really brought life around how we get through struggles because of our friend group, because of the people that we
Mm-hmm.
have around us, because of our circle, our squad. They pull us out of them dark places
Yes.
sometimes. So
Yes.
it's no such thing as, Black women can't get along. If you can't get along with the Black women in your life, you in the wrong circle. Like,
Mm-hmm.
you need to check why you attracted to these type of women, you know. And so I think that's one of the things. And I think that one thing that it did, I ended it talking about how I came over that, and how I got a PhD and how I work with human trafficking victims, and how how that work came about. I took the reason I worked with those victims is because I was out doing ministry one night, and I promise you, I saw a woman that reminded me so much of my mother. I never thought in my mind that my mother may have prostituted herself to get this drug. That never crossed my mind until I saw that woman. And so I think that, you know, I think one of the myths I would just want to bust away is that there is no strength in struggle.
Mm, mm. So you said a couple of things. One is this idea that the drug addiction or the addiction, whatever it is just affecting that person. My last book, called From Darkness to Night, is a book about just that. It's about a brother who's a drug addict and the sister who feels guilty because she dated the dope man who gave him drugs. And she lives her life in this shame of what she had done. But her mother was so distant and so disconnected from her. And ultimately, a lot of her pain and her brother's pain came from generational curses, things that they had no idea about, that had literally corroded the mother and allowed her not to be the mother she should have been. And so I love that you're talking about these issues, because I remember I'm in a writing group and someone read my work and said, "Oh, it's so sad." And I remember going, why is it that what we write has to be happy? Life is sad. Life is tough. And hard things happen. Hard things happen all the time. But those stories are not stories to destroy us. They're there to make us stronger. And I love that that's what you're doing with your work, is to try to build up Black women, build up Black people, women, period, all women, so that we can be stronger. Now, you said something about girlfriends. I love my girlfriends, I tell you. And I always say I have 4 friends, and I'm all good with that. But I really do get that. One of my friends always say, men don't have anyone to talk to, but we can turn to Essence and Girlfriends and Cosmo. And, we create these tribal cultural things that help us to pull ourselves out of hard times. And we are strong. Women are strong. We are fearless. So I really do love what you're talking about. Now let's talk a little bit about what you do and how, like you just said, how it ties into your work, into your writing. So tell us about your work with human trafficking.
So I'm the human trafficking specialist for Cook County Juvenile Court. My work in human trafficking actually started with a ministry called Rosa Sharon Ministry out of Chicago Dream Center, which is an affiliate of New Life Covenant Church. And so the work that we do is we literally go to the street, we go to the strip clubs, and we minister to those individuals who are in street-based prostitution, who are being exploited in strip clubs. Some of them go to massage parlors. I don't do massage parlors because that's not my, I have to be passionate about something, and I don't ever want to come in as being disgenuine. And so I try to leave the things that I'm not good at to other people. So we go out and we give out what we call care bags for ministry. And I still do this from time to time. But it was the ministry that made Cook County say, wait a minute, we may need this here. Because so many of the young girls, even guys, those that were part of the LGBT community, they would go missing all the time go missing. And the word kind of got out, like, if you got a missing girl, Kisha gonna find her, because she outside on Friday night, and I would get these. On Friday morning, my phone would just start lighting up, like, this girl is missing, and I would see a lot of those girls in exploited situations, and I would go back to the officer and say, you might need to contact so-and-so's mother. I wouldn't tell, no one knew what I was doing on Friday night. And so it wasn't until we had a conference that one of the deputies at the department asked me if I would help her put a conference together around human trafficking. I was able to bring all of these resources to trafficking. And in that event, so many girls came to me and said, that's me, like, this is what's going on with me. Nobody knows. Can you help me? Those.
Kisha, I'm going to stop you right there. Tell us, what is human trafficking? And I asked that question not from a
good question.
I don't know. I really don't. I've read about it, and just explain to us what human trafficking is.
So human trafficking is two forms of trafficking. It is comprised of two forms of trafficking sex and labor. Sex trafficking is sexual exploitation by way of force, fraud, or coercion, or the person who has not has the person that's being exploited has not reached their 18th birthday, which means a person can think that, you might have a young girl that said, I'm doing this because I want to, we in our bag together. But if you're not 18, you cannot consent to sell sex. You can consent to have sex in some states at 16, some states at 17. But nationally, in the United States, you cannot consent to sell sex or be involved in any commercial sexual situation until you're 18. Now, labor is domestic servitude, farming, it's stripping, it is massage parlors. And in those situations, in massage parlors and exotic dancing and pornography, we see a lot of intersection between sex and labor. Those are individuals who got involved thinking that they were getting involved in a situation that was legitimate, and then they found out, no, this is what this is. And oftentimes those individuals who are involved in, from the labor perspective, the person that's trafficking them is paying for their food, their shelter, they're holding their IDs. You see a lot of international, when you see a lot of labor trafficking, is usually more on the East Coast, but you see a lot around farming areas, and we ignore that. We do not look at those labor issues around farming and around domestic servitude, maids, and specifically, when we think about pornography, people always say, well, that's a legitimate business, it's legal. I guarantee you that those young girls did not consent to that, and they cannot consent because they're usually under 18. So that is what human trafficking is, specifically from a domestic lens. And so the work that we're doing in Cook County is we're trying to assess the young ladies as they come in. We're looking for identifiers, enhancers, and red flags so that we can get them the services that they need and then re-engage them back in their families with strength-based programming in place.
In an age where it seems like we've got everything, we've got all this technology and kids have, anything, they got Jordans and all the things that they just love to have. And, it's sad to know that a lot of our girls are still getting caught up, swept up in these different lifestyles.
So
what is it that you see? I'm sorry.
So let me just go back. You said they have a lot of things. And I think that that's another myth that I hope Who's Little Girl 2 debuff, because a lot of people look at trafficking and they think of a monetary exchange. So when we define a commercial sex act, it's an act of which anything of value is exchanged. So a lot of times it's not monetary. A lot of times it's housing. A lot of times it may be friendships, loving, intimate partner relationships. I would say I've been doing this work over 11 years, and I think I can say without a doubt that most of the girls who get involved in trafficking get involved through a relationship. It's not about the need for any financial gain. It's about this relationship that they lack. And men always ask me, how can I help in the struggle? You can demonstrate healthy relationships to our young girls, because they don't know what healthy relationships look like. And so when that guy gets to talking to them and making them feel some kind of way, and they don't have a father figure at the house, or they don't know what a loving relationship feels like, or how to receive positive love from a man, they can do anything to them. When we think about pimping, professional in manipulating people, if a person gets your mind and your heart, your body just follows. It's just a natural thing for your body to follow what your mind tells them to do. And so I don't want people to think that girls are getting involved because they're making a whole lot of money. They're not making any money. A lot of times, a lot of girls that I interact with is for shelter. Now, what I do have a problem with is being in 2021 and a girl will have to lay on her back just to have somewhere to lay down. Right. I have an issue with that, because we fund everything else. So we should be funding some, shelters or some housing situations where that is not the first line of defense.
I 100% agree with you on that. I love what you're doing. And, you're a hero to me. You're someone out there, boots on the ground, making things happen and trying to save our kids.
Thank you.
And, that's what I just believe, that God didn't put us here to do nothing. You know what I'm saying? I just really don't. And it bothers me sometimes when I talk to people and they say, why are you always doing so much? I don't think God put me here to do nothing.
Right.
And I look at you, a young lady who has struggled, who has had to deal with things with her mother's death, probably all the stigmatization of people saying things and doing things, and all the unkind words that can be said in that situation, all the cultural taboos. And not only are you writing books, not only are you getting a doctorate degree, but you are also out here on the streets trying to save our girls. I mean, I'm just going to say that. Congratulations to you. Keep
Thank
doing
you.
what you're doing
But to be
because
honest, it could
mhm,
be me. I mean, it honestly,
absolutely,
like it
absolutely.
could have
Anyway,
definitely been me. I know. I think about relationships I was in. I thank God that they didn't put me out there because I was so gone. I probably would have went.
yes, me too. I mean, let's just keep it real.
Yeah,
I grew
I
up,
mean,
I grew up in public housing. I did things. I was
me
look.
too. Like
You
so.
know, I love being a woman, and I say this all the time to my husband about, we have a lot of nieces and nephews. We have a little boy too, but I always say you cannot just raise a princess. She has to be a princess warrior
Mhm.
because when the lights are down, you don't know what's happening to our girls. Stop assuming that, oh, they live in a nice house, they got, mom and dad at home, and they've got all these things, and somebody's there to protect them. Money, parents at home, all you don't know what girls are getting into because we're
You don't
influential,
know
and
what's
now
happening
with
to
social
her girl.
media, I could
Stop
not even
assuming that.
I could not even imagine now growing up with social media in your face. People criticizing you, people telling you or saying things about you, or you having to feel like you have to live up to something. It is really, really tough. You were about to say something.
Social media is the number one pathway into trafficking, and it's been that trend has been building for the last probably 5 years. But during this COVID pandemic, social media has become not only a pathway, a platform for advertisement, and it's also been a means of collecting money, a way of meeting up. It's so much happening on social media that we really have to do a better job of regulating,
Hmm.
what is allowed. And I always say that posts are flagged for who they want to flag it for. So we see
Hmm.
posts get flagged for girls. Oh, we can't have this on there. You say the wrong, you curse, they gonna flag you.
There
So
will.
how is it that a young lady? I had a case where a young lady sat on social media and masturbated, and it was never taken down. The account was never closed. So you flag what you want to flag. But we have to start changing the narrative that say girls that look like us is just as important.
Hmm.
And when
Hmm.
girls go missing, we got to stop putting the stigma on them about them being fast, about, oh, they so fast, they running after these guys. We never ask what they running from. What's going on in that house that makes them want to run? Who just want to sleep from couch to couch?
Nobody. I feel like that about everything. I feel like that about prostitution, about crime in general. We have to stop just thinking these are just bad people, bad kids,
Mm-hmm.
especially from the black kids. We have to start saying what is creating a world that they feel that this is the only path to take. What is creating that? And then we have to take the blinders off and accept what we see. Accept that, there are situations where girls are being touched and raped in the home.
And
You know
so
what I'm saying? And
97%
abused.
of girls that's involved in exploitation was seasoned, what we call seasoned, which means that they had former sexual exploitation in the home prior to ever being introduced to what we call their turnout. Because
Right.
if you have already been abused in the home, when somebody make you think that you are empowered to sell something that has been taken from you, it's almost like taking back something that's been taken from you. Now I get to
Hmm.
choose what I do with it, and as a young child, and they are children.
Hmm.
Anyone under the age of 18, they're children. They don't have a mental capacity to, say, okay, this isn't right, or this isn't really empowering. They just know that they're trying to heal from something, and this seems like something that's making it feel better until it's not anymore. And we don't listen to our young ladies. When our young ladies complain about something inappropriate, we blame, 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 blame. We blame their outfits. We blame their mothers. We blame their behavior. We blame their dancing. We blame the music they listen to. We never stop and just say, what do you need?
Right.
And I think that that's what made my job so easy, because I know what I needed, but I also know what I needed then is different from what they need now.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, it's important to ask questions. I ask questions. What do you need? Are you safe? What, if you don't want to talk to me, is it a safe person that you feel comfortable talking to? I use a lot of letter writing. I don't like families to come into court and find out their child is being exploited in front of a white judge. And so oftentimes I try to tell my girls, why don't you write your mother a letter and explain what's going on, so that the first time she's hearing it is not from a state's attorney or a judge, or try to facilitate some of those conversations with parents around what is going on and how we not just help that girl, because we have to send that girl back to that family. Mm-hmm. And that's the issue I have with the system. We remove from the system and we fix these kids up really cute, like the cutest little dolls, and we send them back to the same environment in which they first ran from. So what are we doing in the environment while we making them pretty?
Girl, Keisha, you putting it down. I wish I can just, tell you a couple of things. I want to, but been through, I know what you're talking about. The system is broken. Um, our kids are being stuck in homes that are unhealthy and unsafe. And the system wants to reunify because they feel like, oh, this child's going to do better at home.
And it's cheaper.
Biological. Right. And it's cheaper. And what we're doing is setting them up for a complete just failure in a huge way. So please continue to do what you're doing. There are a lot of comments coming in. I don't think I see any questions, but I'm going to go over the comments in a little bit. I just wanted to continue to talk about your writing. Now, your last book is Whose Little Girl Am I? 2. But tell me something. You were saying there was a compilation of a bunch of writers who wrote the first one. What did you learn from the other writers?
From Grace or Whose Little Girl 1?
One. I think one is the one where you said 35 writers.
No, that's Grace.
I'm sorry, Grace. So Whose Little Girl, Whose Little Girl Am I is your book. You have okay.
That's a byline. I do have my sister. My sister wrote one chapter. My daughter wrote a chapter. My other sister wrote a chapter.
Okay, great. I just was wondering from Grace, what did you learn from other people who wrote that helped you to improve yourself or see yourself in a better light?
Oh my God. Everything. Like we have women in Grace who wrote about losing their entire family in a car accident, being the sole survivor of a car accident. And she talked about how she survived that grief. And so for me, I have lost a lot, but never at one time. And so the way that she was able to I learned so much about processing grief, and I didn't even know that I would need to process that grief the way that I have with people that I've lost since writing Grace. I had no idea that I would need to learn how to process grief. Just about women talking about, one of the things that I think was really good was how women really talked about their relationship. And what I learned from Grace is how to be accountable in the role that I played. For so long, I played the victim in every relationship. But if I'm honest with myself, fair exchange ain't no robbery. So I was getting something out of that relationship. I just didn't want to identify what I was getting because it would make me culpable of some of the pain that I had experienced. And so that's one of the things that I learned from reading all the stories in Grace, how these women they were accountable, to themselves. When they talked to that younger girl, they talked about the role they played in some of that pain. And so that is something that I really learned. And you really will see the difference when reading 2, because 2 is not a nonfiction. It's actually, it's based on the lives of true stories, but the way it's compiled is not, like a fiction, a non-fiction story, like this is so-and-so, this is so-and-so, but a lot of my voice is in there. And you will definitely be able to see where through the book, I try to identify where I was culpable of some things. You said something about your brother and drugs and dating a drug dealer. I had a whole baby with one of the biggest drug dealers on the south side of Chicago. Yet I would go weeks without speaking to my mother because she used drugs.
Mm-hmm.
Like, make it make sense. You can't sleep next to the man that's poisoning the community and be mad because the community is poisoned. You
Right.
gotta take some, you can't walk around in these Dooney and Burke these Dooney and Burke purses and shilling jackets and not take some accountability into how you help ruin that community, and so, or that relationship with your mother.
Mm-hmm.
And to think about even, what other little girl went hungry so I can get this purse? At 19, that wasn't my thought process. But at 44, when I think about how much money came into the house that came out of somebody's pantry, it don't sit well with me anymore. And so I have to be honest and accountable to some of the things that I experienced. I put myself in some situations that I didn't have to be in. And I definitely learned that accountability from Grace.
And this is what you call growth. This is what you call growth. If everybody want to know what growth is, this is it. And also, I believe that you only know what you're taught.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So this idea that, oh, you're 25, you're an adult, you should know better. Some of us don't know better because we were never taught better. And that's where I struggle with the mother-daughter relationship, is that I've noticed how men will sit in a barbershop and give advice to young boys, whether right or wrong, they'll do it. Don't date her. She ain't about this. Men are very fluent with they're comfortable giving advice even when they've made a ton of mistakes. Women, we make mistakes and we don't tell our daughters. We don't want them to know. We will rather sit and say, I don't feel like I have the right to tell her how to live because I've made all these mistakes. I've been married all these times. Tell your daughters what you did wrong.
Because
Tell
they
them.
gonna do it. If you don't tell them, it's gonna be like watching yourself in a movie.
Tell them. We only know what we don't know. You only know what you're taught. And so I would love to just impress upon mothers, get from behind the veil, sit your little girl down, tell her about that guy who broke you down to nothing. Tell her about dating a drug dealer. Tell her about, having babies when you may not have been really ready, but yet you did it anyway. Tell her about those hard times when you cried in the dark, when you couldn't pay the rent, when you didn't know, how things were going to go. Or tell her, even as she gets older, if you had to sell yourself for sex, if you had to be with a man because you needed to pay rent.
How about the landlord when he came on the first and you didn't have the rent?
Exactly. Tell us, because we're sitting here and we're trying to live, we're trying to figure out how to be women from stuff we see on TV that doesn't even represent us. And so I think that is where I think the mother-daughter relationship has to get stronger, where we are not, we're not passing down all this pain.
We got to
But we're
debunk the fairy
instead
tale too.
educating.
We have to debunk the fairy tale of what mother-daughter relationships are. This idea that there is a cookie cutter approach to raising. You got to raise the daughter that God gave you.
There you go.
You can't raise her the way the next door neighbor or the person on TV is raising. He gives you an assignment. When you have a child, you are assigned to journey with her. Yes. You don't just birth her physically. You are responsible for birthing her mind, birthing her emotions, how you handle those things. You can't handle every single person the same way. And I think that that's where that transparency come in, sitting down and not just telling, but having conversations around. You know how many girls get into things that, could have been avoided had they just had a conversation. Now, that's one thing I will say about my mother. She'll talk to you about anything. And I don't know if it was because we didn't have that normal mother-daughter relationship, but she didn't have any problem talking about, this is life. This is what's going on. This is what I've done. I'm not proud of it. And so I kind of carried that into my own relationship with my daughter. I don't think it's anything about my daughter that I don't know. I mean, anything about me that my daughter don't know, because I don't want, and it's sometimes those are the hardest conversations. Having a conversation about her father being a drug dealer, having conversations about the children that her father had on me, those was some of the hardest conversations I had to have with her. However, I needed her to know that this happens. And I needed her to know the signs so that she could avoid going through what I went through.
Look, your mother was honest with you, and look at you. You know, you're healing. Honesty, truth heals.
Mm-hmm.
It's when we're living in this dark, when we don't know why we act the way we act, when we can't keep a relationship going because our attitudes are just wrong, but we've been so beat up and abused in our own way, we can't even define it. It's nothing like being in an abusive relationship and can't even say that you've been in an abusive
Or
relationship
don't
because,
recognize that it's abuse because you
exactly, because
normalize
you
this behavior.
exactly. And you know, and that's the type of thing that that truth will help you with. Girl, we could talk all day. So we've got a couple of comments coming in, and I want to talk to you about whose little girl am I? Because I want to know whose little girl are you, and that's going to be our next conversation. But I want to go up and give everybody their respect on their comments. Or Ray Matthews has said a couple of things. He said hello first. He said so true. We was talking about some things, and there is so much truth in everything that you're saying. Um, I think it's Tanera. She said, I'm proud of you, cousin. Ray comes back. He says, yes, thank you. Congrats. We need more women coming together to help our community and help other women. So true. Um, Tamila Lucas said, that's right. Children need a safe place to vent. Absolutely. To vent. Absolutely. I totally agree. And Ray comes back. He says, also, bullying on social media is important. It is happening. And where can he find your book? So
You can
let's
find
get into that.
so the book. Thank you to everyone. The book can be found at www.drkisharobertstab.com. It can also be found on Amazon. All the books can be found on Amazon or my personal website. Um, you wanted to talk about what was your first
I
question?
wanted to talk about your last book. And I'm sorry, I think my internet is a little weak today. So if I'm going in and out, please forgive me on that. It's one thing when it comes to going live, it happens.
So the last book, Who's
Mhm.
Little Girl 2? Anyone with money to buy. Um, Literally, I took the experience that I had experienced being the human trafficking specialist, which I've seen things that it's unimaginable, but I didn't want to I did not want to pimp anybody's pain or glorify what anyone was feeling. So I really just wanted to paint a picture of pathways, how people got involved, who got them involved, what were they already dealing with, and how that made them vulnerable to this situation. And then I wanted to deal with the woman that was responsible, Lane, which so this book really derived from one. I had Sweet Thing. That was the introduction of the work that I did. I talked about human trafficking in the first book with the chapter Sweet Thing, and I talked about relationships in a chapter called In My Own Lane. And so Lane and Sweet Thing kind of developed this next book, which is Who's Little Girl 2? Anyone with Money to Buy. And the reason why I wanted to look at those two people, because Lane thought that she had it all together because she was dealing with men with money. She looked good. She knew how to do what she did. She thought she knew how to keep a man in her bed. And she never looked at those relationships as being exploitive. And so I really wanted to look at how the dichotomy of exploitation, whether it's a commercial sexual exploitation or relational exploitation. And we never talk about these relational exploitations, whether they're in marriages, relationships, whatever it is. Anytime you do more than you get, you're giving more than you getting, you may find yourself being exploited. Anytime what you're being asked to do or what you're being asked to accept becomes too much for you, but you continue to do it because of what you think you're getting from it, that's exploitation. It's just relational. And so I really, really wanted to talk about the female experience from an exploitive lens, not just so that we can talk about, oh, human trafficking is so bad, but I do want parents, I want girls, I want them to be able to see the signs. And so when each chapter, I really dive into how they got involved, because I think that's important, because if that's preventative to me, if we could recognize those signs on the front end, you don't need me on the back end. You don't need a human trafficking specialist in your life, because you recognize those signs and you recognize what those young ladies need. And I tried to bring voice to their needs, not just their situation, not just sensationalizing, what they went through, but what did this young lady need that she wasn't getting? that led her into that pathway.
So walk me through a scenario, because everybody's not going to read your book.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we know that. But what you're talking about is so important, and I'm hoping that everyone will go out and read. I put your author book, your website in the chat so everyone can see it. And I'm hoping everybody will take time and go read your books because this is so important. But walk me through a scenario that you think is very common that ends up getting our girls in these exploitative situations. Common things that you're just seeing, what the guy may say, what he may be doing. Kind of give us a little bit of what that looks like.
So I can read a quick chapter. It's like 3 pages. Is my name is Heaven. My skin is yellow. My hair is long. Between two worlds, I do belong. Ding. I looked down at the phone and noticed that I had a notification. Who is this dude? Why does he keep liking all my pictures? I thought to myself. Antoine, how do I know him? We have 47 mutual friends. We must know each other. The first few times he liked my pictures, I didn't pay any attention to him. But each day I noticed his name more and more. This dude liked every picture I put up. After about 2 months of him stalking my page, I received a friend request from him. This was my admirer. I accepted it. Antoine's request and his inboxing began. He inboxed me every day, and I couldn't wait to get out of school to get to my phone to see if I had a message from Antoine. Each day I did. We spent all day messaging each other. We talked about everything from my family, my biological family, and all the people that we had in common. When he was my age, he actually went to the same elementary school I currently attended. Talking to him, you would never believe he was 21 years old. I swear it seemed like I had known this person my entire life. It was like he was the only person that understood me. He began to pick me up from school, dropping me off at the corner, or I would sneak out and meet him after my parents went to bed. The more I linked up with him and talked to him, the more the lines became blurred. I was confused. I didn't know if I looked at him as a big brother or someone I was attracted to. The lines became completely crossed by chilling at his boy's house one night. The party started to dwindle down, leaving Antoine and I on the couch watching Pretty Little Liars. The thought of this grown man so engrossed in a teen drama demonstrated to me the thought of this grown man engrossed in this teen drama demonstrated in the show cracked me up. Small things like that confused me so much. We had began hanging out for months, and he never touched me. He seemed so protective of me when we were kicking it with his homeboys. Antoine always made sure he kept me close to him. His protection was not that of a man protecting his woman, but more like a big brother keeping his baby sister safe. So why do I have these butterflies in my stomach every time I'm close to him? My entire body was set ablaze by a mere shove of this man. I sat wondering if I should tell him to take me home, although I really wanted to stay. Next to him was the only place that I felt home. Don't get me wrong, my parents were amazing. So I'm going to stop there because that is what I see all the time. I see
Yeah.
young ladies being enticed and a growing relationship that happens on social media. A person falls in love with a person before they ever set eyes on them. And that's what I see. And it starts from the liking of the pages. It starts from the inboxing. You know, when you like a page, when you like someone's picture so many times, they believe they know them. When you think about psychological, 21 things, 21 doing something 21 times create a habit. So if I'm constantly seeing this like steady going up, when he gets to my friend request, I instantly think I know him. Then I go and see we got 47 mutual friends. Of course I know him. Then we start to hang out. Then we start texting and we're on the phone. That's data gathering. Now he's seeing what times I can talk. When is my parents usually not around? When he can call me, when he can sneak and pick me up. All of those things is the grooming process. And so in that chapter, I really talk about internet grooming and how that process led her into a relationship with a 21-year-old man. And I don't know if you caught it. He went to the same elementary school that I currently attend, which means this is an elementary school young lady that's in this relationship with a 21-year-old man. And what is he doing? He's liking the things she like. He's watching what 21-year-old man watching Pretty Little Liars. It's all the grooming process. It's the reeling in. So when he gets you and he has sex with you, now he has your mind, he has your body. Then he introduced you to another partner. I need you to do me a favor.
Mhm.
I need you to sleep with this person. The moment that you say no, I'm cutting off what you've grown to need. You've become addicted to the validation that I'm giving you. You've become addicted to my touch, the sex. And a young girl that age cannot handle a 21-year-old man sexually. So that alone is grooming. And so then you find yourself doing things for this man because you just don't want to lose him. And that is how it happens.
Kisha, what you just read is my book. In my book, she's 12 and she is being groomed by a 21-year-old. And she ends up being raped by him. And to write that, I struggled with it because I felt like there would be readers who just say, how dare you talk about a 21-year-old man having sex with a 12-year-old? But I could not write that because it is real and it happens. And it wasn't a forceful rape. It was starting with the mind and making her
Coercion.
feel right. That it's comfortable, it's okay. Wow, I love that. I hope everybody out there will go out and get your book. Ama has said a couple of things. She said, when you have children, you are assigned, which is something that you said before. Ama also said, this is such a much needed conversation. I wish more people were on to participate. Ama, don't worry about it because we're going to have it on the podcast. It's going to be on YouTube and it's going to be spinning all over Facebook. This conversation will go far. I really appreciate you coming on. I wanted to talk a little bit about how you publish, because that's always something that we talk about on the Black Writers Workspace. So tell us, how did you publish your book?
Well, I self-published, and I did not intend on self-publishing. I happened to go through a few different publishers. I was being, dated, I guess, by a few publishers. But one in particular, I'll never forget, Sheridan Davis. She has a company called Chocolate Chip Publishing Company. And so when I met with Sheridan, I sent her some writing. She loved it. And then when she talked to me and she started asking me, like, what have you done? This, that, and the third. She was honest with me and said, to take you as a client, I will be stealing from you because you've done so much of the work on your own. It doesn't make sense for you to go through publishing. And I will always cherish her for that honesty, because most business people will be like, come, because I didn't know, I didn't know. And so that was how I I ended up self-publishing, because she literally was like, you've done all my work for me already. So, and I appreciated that. And so, yes, I do self-publish all of my writing. Even my grandson's book was self-published under my account. And I think that it's important that we understand that self-publishing is not it doesn't mean that your work is not as worthy as any other publishing company. It means that all publishing companies don't give us the same voice. They don't always create a space for us. And when they do, sometimes they try to change what you're trying to put out, to fit their audience. Right. And I guarantee you, I just want to say, any writers on here, when you are writing purposeful work and you're writing in your passion, you don't have to worry about the publishing world and the game and all of that, because God will bring the people to you who needs to hear the story that you're writing. We get so caught up on labels and names, and this publishing company published me, and that and you could have had 1 million people read it, but if nobody was inspired or impacted, what did you do?
Nothing. Yes, and amen to that. We had a writers workshop last week. It was our first on the Black Writers Workspace. And for those of you who don't know, the Black Writers Workspace is an online community of writers. Most of us are self-published. I am also self-published. Most of us self-published by choice, because we're not trying to, first of all, delay the release of work that needs to be a healing factor in someone's life. So why delay it? But we had someone on who's a traditional publishing expert, and she said something that was very profound. She said, once you self-publish your first book, the publishing companies don't want to touch you. So it's all about the numbers. It is all about the numbers. And I am not going to delay putting my work out into the world because I'm worried about someone making $100,000 off of it. So
someone else, because they usually make 97% of the money that they get 93 to 97% of every sale. Mm-hmm. That didn't sit right with me.
Me neither. And so I'm glad to hear that you are self-published, and I'm glad to hear that you're continuing to put your work out there. This has been such an amazing conversation. I think we could talk for a really, really long time. We need to talk more with people like you who are open and honest, because that's where this starts, being honest. Many of us have similar backgrounds. You'll be amazed. No one talks about it. I've heard, oh man, since I've started doing these interviews, I have met women who have gone through so much and they're just moving forward. I had Twitter actually block or try to put a label on something I posted yesterday, where at the workshop, one of the writers was talking about how her mother was murdered by her stepfather. And they want to put a label, a warning label on that. That bothered me greatly, because these are truths coming from people who are willing to share. The world needs to hear about these things, and what we're writing about is so important, and we have to keep writing. But we cannot be censored by, I don't want to know your pain. Like I said, someone said to me, "Oh, this story is so sad." I'm like, it's a story about people who are humans doing and dealing with the human experience. And the human experience is very tough from time to time. It can be beautiful and it can be really tough. So continue to write, continue to do what you're doing. Thank you to everyone who chimed in. Thank you to everyone for being a part of this conversation. Kisha, continue to be a part of the Black Writers Workspace. Continue to put your work out into the world and sharing it with us. For those of you, this will be on Spotify. It would be on, you can also find me, Michelle Jackson, Michelle D. Jackson on anchor.fm. It will be on YouTube. We'll put clips of it on Instagram and Twitter. And Facebook, of course, it is on Facebook now, and you can always watch this entire video. I am happy to have met you, and I am so inspired by your transparency and your wonderful writing skills. That excerpt, the chapters that you read, really speaks to so many of us. Now, I wasn't in the social media phase of life, like I'm 47, so I didn't grow up with social media, but that story still relates to me. You were groomed, we were being groomed before social media, because it's all in the way people approach you, and oh, you're so pretty, and oh, you should come over, and oh, and before you know it, you're in a situation you can't get out of. It happens all the time, and our young girls need to be able to identify when they're being groomed. And women need to be identifying it. We all need to be identifying. Give us some last words for our writers to keep them motivated to keep going.
I want to advise anyone who wants to write, don't share everything with everybody. People don't always understand purpose. When God put a purpose in your heart, it's for you and him to understand. You don't need to be validated by man. All validation comes from above. But when you start, getting caught up in what other people say, especially when you put everything on social media, it will stifle you. It will stifle your purpose. It will stifle your passion. Find your purpose, become passionate about it, the profit will follow.
Dr. Kisha, on the street, helping our young people, writing and helping our young girls, sharing her story. This is what this is all about. We thank you so much for being with us. I'm going to take you off the screen, but I don't want you to leave, because I want to say farewell to you. Tell us your books one more time and how to get them.
We have Who's Little Girl 1. We have the guided journal from Who's Little Girl 1. We have KJ Goes to Big Boy School. Please support my grandson. He is such an awesome young man. I love him so much. Go out and get this book. And Who's Little Girl 2. Anyone with money to buy. And they all can be found at www.drkisharobertstabb.com.
Excellent. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you for having me, Michelle. Thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure.
So everybody, wow. I don't know if you learned anything. I did. I learned a lot. She was excellent. Not just that she's writing books and sharing those books with the world, but also she's out there doing the work. And I don't know about you guys, but doing the work is what it's all about. We are here to do the work. And for those of you who are writing and who need to be motivated, if you're not motivated by Kisha and everything that she's doing, if you're not motivated to tell your story in your way, if you're not motivated to share what you've done with the world so that you can make the world a better place, if that's what your work is doing, she should have given you all the motivation that you need. So thank you all for being here. Once again, you can find this on YouTube, Facebook, and on anchor.fm or Spotify and a host of other podcast platforms. We will be uploading it and making sure that everyone is well aware of how to get Kisha's work, how to support her, because that's exactly what we're here to do, is to support our writers. Thank you all.